Aitah for not acknowledging my uncle's existence and not calling him after his son was Unalived? My uncle 40M is my mother's 50F brother. Let's call him Ken. Ken is the youngest of the siblings and he has always been my mother's favorite brother. He and my mother were always close. My mother was the one to put him through college and my mother gave him a place to stay for 5 years while he was finishing his degree as an architect. I had fond memories of my uncle. He was the cool one, the one who knew all the cool songs and all the rock bands we were supposed to listen to. He always had fun commentary on every trending movie and me and my siblings had to see whatever movie he recommended. I remember he wore his hair long and he used to take us out in our parents' car to wherever we wanted. So it was fair to say we had an awesome relationship with our Uncle Ken. We all grew up looking up to him. Later on he gave me my first job at his company and he allowed me to stay at his house during the weekends so I could party and not get in trouble with my parents. He always took my side when I argued with my mom and he was the first person to call me on my birthday. He never forgot my birthday. Everything started to change when he met his wife, let's call her Karen. Karen was an anorexic, speed-using, mean and racist woman, but she was great at her job. She was smart and hardworking. She continuously took stimulants to work non-stop and to lose weight. I remember clearly being at her house one day and she changed her clothes in front of me and she said, "Look how fat I am," while staring at the mirror. I just remember looking at her bony arms and legs and not comprehending what she meant. She was dreadfully skinny and her knees protruded from her skinny legs. My Uncle Ken and Karen used to take us to McDonald's and Karen ate only the beef patty while scolding us because we dared to eat fries in front of her. Karen was absolutely controlling. Karen was also one of those people who was nice to your face and mean while you were not around. I used to work with her and saw her work tirelessly like a robot with the aid of her stimulants, dealing with clients nicely, and as soon as the clients or coworkers left she would criticize their weight, their looks, their smell, their everything. Karen had an awful relationship with her parents and siblings. They would constantly scream and insult each other in ways I had never seen before. They went so far as to throw things at each other in fits of rage that made me tremble. This happened regularly, like 3 times a week. I quit that job for my mental health and sanity, citing several commitments in university. Karen was awful to my Uncle Ken, unstable, critical and controlling. You had to walk on pins and needles with her. Karen was unusually focused on making money. There is nothing wrong with that, but she seemed extra greedy and some of the things she did were not entirely ethical. This attitude and outlook on life started to rub off on my uncle. They would do anything to cheat anybody out of anything, like their employees with time, their customers or providers. It seemed that nothing was beyond them when it came to making money. Karen and Ken had children. Their first child was a psycho. Yes, he was. Let me explain. Let's call my cousin the psycho Kevin. Kevin tortured animals by sticking pencils up their butts. I remember catching him doing it when he was about 5 or 6. When I told him not to do that to his pet, he smiled in the most wicked, bone-chilling way. He saw me with his beautiful cherubic face and smiled. I remember that evil smile to this day. It was awful and I felt disgusted. I wanted to wring that little bastard's neck. Kevin's pets kept dying and Karen kept getting more for him. Everybody told her that she should stop getting him pets, but she never listened. My Uncle Ken and Karen had a second child. Let's call him Kenneth. While Karen was pregnant with Kenneth, she showed me a racist article where she said that it was proven that genetically, Caucasian people were superior to all the races and that Africans, or black people, were the most inferior. I told her straight away that I did not believe that could be true, but she went on to print the article and proceeded to explain the so-called proof. I remember feeling disgusted by Karen that day and thought that for her bigoted thinking she was going to get karma one day. Her second child Kenneth was born with MS. Ken's and Karen's life was a mess. I kinda drifted away from them. Karen and the little boy Kevin were just too awful. Even though I still loved my uncle, I saw him change slowly for the worse, so we slowly drifted apart. A couple of years later I found out Karen's siblings were suing her because my uncle and her sold a house that had belonged to all of them. Karen lost and had to repay her siblings. I mention this because this will be relevant later on as to understanding how Ken and Karen treat family. My Uncle Ken started acting weird around money, like asking for small loans and never paying them back or getting angry when you reminded him to pay the loan. I loaned him $1,000 and decided not to keep asking him to pay me back because he got really angry when reminded of the loan, so I eventually let it go. But the worst was the following. My Uncle Ken asked my mom for $25,000 for a car for my cousin Kevin the Psycho. My mother loaned it to him. When she asked for the money back, he said he didn't have it, but he would pay her with a piece of land worth $19,000 in the middle of nowhere. I asked my mom if they had signed anything and she said no, so she ended up taking the land, even at a $6,000 loss, because it was better than nothing. I was livid. My mom was not rich, she had used a sizable amount of her savings to loan him that money. My mother partly did it because Kevin the Psycho was her favorite nephew. One summer Kevin the Psycho stayed with us at our home. My mom loved Kevin, he was a beautiful child, blonde and green-eyed, he was around 13 at that time. I found out that while I was at work he used to sneak up on the roof and torture my beloved dog by throwing firecrackers at him for hours on end. I remember coming home from work and noticing that my dog was angry and scared until I found out the truth. I wanted to physically hurt my cousin when I found out about what he had been doing to my dog. But my mother said he was just a kid being mischievous. Kevin was charming when he wanted and he got whatever he wanted from my mom, mainly money. I ended up requesting permission at work to take my dog to work just for a couple of days until Kevin the Psycho left and my boss thankfully allowed it. This situation just made me stay away from that family even more. My grandmother had 2 houses, which she left to my mother's sister, my aunt, let's call her Keely. My mother's sister, Keely, never married and was the one who did not do so well in life. She lived with my grandma all her life. So my grandma left her both houses, one to live in and the other to rent. When the houses needed maintenance, my mother helped Keely by changing the floor of one house and doing repairs on both of them. My mother never spared money from her siblings and was always willing to help out. There was an understanding that if Keely passed away, the houses would be for my Uncle Ken and my mother. Keely sadly passed away and my Uncle Ken said he was going to take care of the houses and everything legal with them. My mother trusted him to do the right thing. My mom never needed the houses or their income if any, but one day my mother and father divorced and suddenly my mother had nowhere to live. My mother thought she could just go to one of the houses my grandma had left and live comfortably there. When my mother inquired about living there to my uncle said she could go if she paid him $2,000 for rent. My mother was stunned, one of the houses was hers, he could not charge her for it, she said. But my uncle never budged. It turned out that my mother's sister Keely had acquired massive credit card debt and my uncle had convinced her to put the houses under his son Kevin, the Psycho's name. My mother's sister did so, she put both houses under his name so that the credit card company did not take them away. The understanding was that this was his, my Uncle Ken's, and my mom's houses. But now that my mother needed a place to live, my uncle was charging her an insane amount of money for rent. My mother attributed it all to Karen's influence. Suddenly my mother had nowhere to live and had to look for somewhere cheaper to rent using the limited funds my father gave her. No amount of talking and persuading changed my uncle's mind. If my mom wanted to live in one of those houses, she had to pay for rent. After this theft, I stopped taking my uncle's calls. When he called on my birthday, I didn't answer. His birthday was 2 days after mine and for the first time, I did not call. I was so angry at him. My mother forgave him and continued her relationship with him even though he had stolen a house from her. One day my mom calls me crying and says Kevin, my Uncle Psycho's son, had been unalived. He had been pew-pewed 17 times in his car with a pew-pew. I was like, what? I remember seeing the news of his passing on TV and people calling me to confirm if it was my cousin or not. It was surreal. Kevin was so young. Let me explain more about Kevin. He had continued his psycho ways during his life. He was involved in illegal gambling and he ran a call center where he tricked old people out of their money, or so they gossiped in my family. He kept on changing locations because the police were on to him. Obviously, I cut him off after my dog's incident, so all the info about him came from my sister and other family members in the form of gossip. He hid for 2 months in my sister's house on a remote beach and in a different state. Hiding from the cops, we thought, but my sister thought he was hiding from something worse. My sister had to kick him out after the second month because the girl he was with trashed her house and they had refused to pay for electricity and other expenses that they had agreed to initially pay. Apparently, he had stolen money from a drug dealer and the drug dealer caught up with him with 17 bullets, ending him with an automatic pew-pew. I never liked my cousin, his good looks and charming manner never deceived me. But it was still shocking to hear about how he was unalived. My uncle was broken, but I never called him to give him my condolences. Not even Kevin being sent to the afterlife made me talk to him or his wife ever again. He messaged me saying that he missed my condolences and seeing me at the funeral because I didn't go. I did not answer his message. Was I the holy for not going to the funeral and for completely cutting off my uncle from my life? My mother says that I was unusually cruel to him after the loss of his son. She said that I should be forgiving and his son being unalived trumped everything he had done before. So am I the holy? Thank you for making it to the end, and if you were entertained, please consider subscribing and liking my video. Always find the best real life, never heard before Reddit stories on real life Reddit.